major presidential hopefuls, Lee Jae-myung of the DP, Kim Moon-soo of the PPP, and Lee Jun-suk of the Reform Party, continued their campaigns today in the conservative strong Southeast, with their own visions for the economy, science, and technology, among others. Officials from around the world gather on Korea's Jeju Island in preparation for the upcoming APEC summit in Gyeongju, hoping to address some of the world's pressing challenges. This time, the APEC Trade Ministers meeting is in the spotlight, with the presence of America's trade chief. A state-run think tank cuts the local growth outlook in half to 0.8% for this year, raising fresh alarms over fears of a recession as Korea struggles with challenges both at home and abroad. It's May 14th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We're now counting down 20 days to the June 3rd snap election. The Liberal Party contender Lee Jae-myung today headed to Busan and Gyeongsang-do province, continuing his efforts to reach out to voters beyond those leaning liberal. Our correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung began his Wednesday campaign in Busan. He first paid tribute at the UN Memorial Cemetery there that honors fallen soldiers who fought and died under the United Nations flag during the Korean War. He said he is giving his all to win and urged everyone to vote, saying the future of the country was on the line.
Our goal is not a landslide, but it's to win, no matter what. While some are optimistic, we expect the race to be very close.
To boost Busan's local economy, Lee pledged to move the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries and the country's largest shipping carrier to Busan.
I don't make impossible promises. I will move the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries to Busan. I'll also make sure HMM, the largest shipping company in Korea, moves here.
Lee's visit to Busan is part of his campaign across the southern regions, traditionally considered conservative strongholds, as he aims to win more support there than in the last election. After Busan, he visited Changwon in Gyeongsang-do province. There, he emphasized national unity, saying the upcoming election isn't just about choosing a president, it's about people's lives, their future, and the direction of the country. He also said that both the party and he himself are ready to serve as tools for the people, asking for their support. Lee then headed to Gyeongsang, a major hub of the shipbuilding industry. Ahead of the visit, Lee announced his shipbuilding policy, pledging to strengthen South Korea's position as a maritime powerhouse through what he called K-shipbuilding. In a social media post, Lee said he aims to make Korea a leader in the global market for smart and eco-friendly ships, while also developing special ships and ship maintenance as new growth engines. He also promised support for developing green fuel-powered ships and digitalizing the entire shipbuilding process. Lee decided to continue his campaign on Thursday in Jeollanam-do province and will visit Gwangyang, Yeosu, and Suncheon. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
The conservative camp's contender remained in the southeastern part of the country as well. People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo focused on his pledges for fostering science and technology. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
For the third straight day on Wednesday, People Power Party's presidential candidate Kim Moon-soo campaigned in the Gyeongsang-do region, hitting cities in Gyeongsang-do province to be exact. As the cities in the province are specialized in their own industries with a focus on science and tech, as he visited Korea Aerospace Administration in Sacheon, he pledged better investment in the science sector, with more administrative power by creating Deputy Prime Minister for Science and Tech.
Why do we need a Deputy Prime Minister for Science? It's because it shows the nation's will, which means budget and power, and this is the only way to yield results. Anything said other than this doesn't matter.
Kim Moon-soo says without science and technology, there is no future, adding that while it may not bring in votes, any leader who cares about Korea's long-term growth must invest heavily in the field. He also revealed his pledge on science and research, which included measures to support research and development in general. But one aspect that stood out was his pledge to send a man to the moon in 2032 and have a Mars rover project by 2045. Also during his visit to Tucson and ability in Changwon, Kim praised the company's resilience through Korea's nuclear phase-out and pledged full support if elected president, especially in advancing SMR technology and leaving politics out of industries. Tucson is a company for the Czech Republic's Dukovany power plant project. Kim is now expected to wrap up his first extended visit to a region and return to the capital region. To wrap up, Kim started off in Seoul, then went southward, stopping by Daejeon and ending up in Daegu on the first day. For day 2, he started in Daegu, then went to Ulsan and ended in Busan, all major metropolitan cities, and did his tours around Gyeongsang-do province. This region is typically known as a conservative stronghold. For reference, throughout the Gyeongsang-do region, there are 65 congressional districts, and during last year's general election, only 6 parliamentary seats were won by the liberal side. That said, a lot has happened since the general election, and Kim could be trying to solidify his supporter base first, then head to other regions. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-seok moved south to the port city of Busan, promising a brighter economic future. He has focused exclusively on the conservative city of Daegu on Tuesday and Busan on Wednesday. Speaking with reporters, Lee pledged to push ahead with the construction of the new international airport on Jeju Island and a new baseball stadium. The candidate also visited Busan National University for lunch, continuing his campus cafeteria outreach that began at Gyeongbuk National University in Daegu the day before. Lee is scheduled to visit other universities in Busan, targeting younger voters. In other news, a local think tank has cut its growth forecast for the local economy in half for this year, with the rate landing in the 0% range. It's taken as a stern warning. Moon Ji-young covers its latest cut and its reasons.
The Korea Development Institute gave a grim economic outlook for South Korea on Wednesday, citing trade uncertainty stemming from tariff and weak domestic demand. Data from the KDI showed it expects the Korean economy to grow just 0.8% this year. That figure is exactly half its 1.6% forecast made only 3 months ago in February. The KDI added that of the 0.8% downward adjustment, external shocks contributed about 0.5 percentage points, and internal shocks contributed 0.3 percentage points.
The biggest factor for this adjustment is the U.S. tariff increase. The U.S. tariff hikes became full-fledged from April. And on top of that, the uncertainty regarding tariff policy has also significantly increased. These factors are having a negative impact on our exports, and we believe this is also partially spilling over negatively into domestic demand.
While the forecast was based on the assumptions that the 90-day suspension of reciprocal tariff would continue, the growth outlook could be adjusted further downward if upcoming negotiations fall through or the suspension ends. The think tank said that despite robust ship shipments, overall exports are slowing and conditions may further weaken if the U.S. raises tariffs. Internally, domestic demand is recovering only slowly due to contracted consumer sentiment, driven by political turmoil as well as the mounting external uncertainties. Private consumption is slowing, especially in the services industry, including accommodation and restaurants. The think tank forecasts that consumer prices will rise by 1.7% this year due to the economic slowdown and falling international oil prices. Other key factors include the sluggish construction industry and weak corporate investment sentiment. The KDI highlighted the need to ease monetary policy to respond to a potential economic slowdown caused by growing uncertainties at home and abroad. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the local labor market saw employment expand in April, but the expansion remains uneven between age groups as well as by industry. Lee Soo-jin has the details.
South Korea's job market continued to grow in April, with job additions posting growth for a fourth consecutive month, but employment of young people and certain sectors continued to face challenges. Data from Statistics Korea on Wednesday showed that the number of employed people aged 15 or older stood at 28.9 million last month, up 194,000 from a year earlier. This marks a gain in the 100,000 range starting from January, after employment figures showed a decline in December. The growth in April was led by job additions in healthcare and social welfare, as well as scientific and technical services. But employment in manufacturing, a key pillar of South Korea's job market, continued to face headwinds. The sector saw job additions drop by more than 120,000, the biggest drop since February 2019, also extending a negative growth for 10 straight months.
Manufacturing employment is weakening further amid sluggish domestic demand and growing external uncertainties.
And construction employment also remains sluggish, falling by 150,000, marking a 12th consecutive month of decline since May last year. By age, employment growth was seen only in those aged 60 and above and 30 and above. And all other age groups saw declines, with those in their 20s posting the sharpest drop.
To address the sharp decline in the employment of young people, stronger fiscal support through a supplementary budget is needed, along with labor reforms to spur corporate investment.
He added that he believes that the risk of job losses remains due to sluggish domestic demand and declining exports. The government, in a ministerial economic meeting headed by the country's acting finance minister on Wednesday, acknowledged ongoing job declines in key industries amid tariff-related uncertainties and pledged to swiftly execute a supplementary budget. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Also on the local front, two men, surnamed So and Kim, have been sentenced to a year and a half in prison, respectively, after attacking the Seoul Western District Court in January. They were also found guilty of throwing bricks and storming the court building. The offenses happened after the court issued an arrest warrant for former President Yoon Suk-yeol over insurrection charges. On Wednesday, judges said the crimes were committed because of their obsession with what they believed was a political plot behind the arrest warrant being issued by the judiciary. Out of around 90 people currently facing trial on similar charges, these two were the first to get prison sentences. U.S. President Donald Trump chose the Middle East as the destination for his first major foreign trip since re-entering the White House. There, he said sanctions on Syria will be lifted. Park Gun-woo has more.
The more than a decade-long U.S. sanctions on Syria to pressure the country's former dictatorship are set to be lifted. That was announced by U.S. President Donald Trump in a speech made at an investment forum held in Riyadh during his 4-day visit to the Gulf, Trump's first international trip since his return to the Oval Office.
I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
Trump said he made the move at the request of Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, while saying U.S. measures against Syria had now fulfilled their purpose. Syria had been urging the U.S. to lift sanctions since last December, following the ousting of its former dictator. Syria's Foreign Minister Assad al-Shaibani called Trump's decision a pivotal turning point, as Syria enters a phase of reconstruction after years of war. Trump is expected to meet with Syria's interim leader Ahmed al-Shara on Wednesday, while U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will hold talks with Syria's foreign minister in Turkey later this week. On Tuesday, Trump called Iran the most destructive force in the Middle East, vowing it would never be allowed to have nuclear weapons. Trump also said he remains open to diplomacy with Tehran, saying he is not just condemning Iran's previous choices.
I want to make a deal with Iran, but if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive maximum pressure, drive Iranian oil exports to zero like I did before.
Also on Tuesday at the U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum, Saudi Arabia announced an investment of $600 billion in the United States. The agreement includes an arms deal worth nearly $142 billion, which the White House called the largest defense cooperation deal Washington has ever done, as well as other technology partnerships. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is headed to Türkiye for peace talks with Russia, insisting that the talks must involve his Russian counterpart, Putin. Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy left for Ankara on Tuesday in hopes of getting a ceasefire agreement with Moscow. However, the Ukrainian president said that he would be going to Istanbul, where Thursday's talks will be held, if Russian President Vladimir Putin attends the talks himself, as he called on the Russian leader to come to the negotiation talks.
We will wait for the meeting with Putin in Türkiye. If Putin is ready to meet, not only for media purposes but in real life, then on the level of leaders we will do everything to agree on a ceasefire, because I must reach a deal about a ceasefire with him, because he is the only person to decide.
Over on the U.S. side, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be headed to Istanbul, along with the U.S. Special Envoys for the Middle East and Ukraine, Steve Witkoff and Keith Kellogg. The U.S. officials will look to broker a ceasefire deal, hoping Moscow will agree to a comprehensive 30-day ceasefire agreement. According to Washington, Kyiv has already agreed to such a deal. While Russian officials will be taking part in the negotiation talks in Istanbul, the Kremlin has remained silent on who's going to represent their side at the talks. According to Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, Russia is continuing its preparations for the upcoming talks, but remain tight-lipped on whether its leader will be traveling to Türkiye as well. The U.S., Russia, and Ukraine will meet in Istanbul on Thursday to discuss a ceasefire for the over 3-year-long war. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
North Korea is projected to have 50 intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads by the year 2035. According to the latest report by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, Pyongyang has successfully tested ballistic missiles with sufficient range to reach the entire U.S. territory. For now, North Korea is assumed to have fewer than 10 ICBMs, but the agency expects the regime to produce around 40 more over the next 10 years. Preparations are underway for the APEC summit in Korea this October, as a meeting takes place in the country involving senior APEC officials, this time with a focus on raising funds for young people. Another agenda will include seeking ways to keep trade open, with the presence of America's trade chief. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Yoon-ji has this report.
Member economies of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation have unanimously approved to establish a fund aimed at supporting and empowering young people. This was agreed upon during a 2-week-long senior officials meeting in South Korea, which will be held up until this Friday. More than 3,000 officials from APEC member states have gathered here at the southern resort island of Jeju for the second senior officials meeting and other related meetings, as South Korea gears up to successfully host the APEC summit later this year. This idea of a future youth fund was earlier proposed by South Korea last November at the APEC summit in Peru. The Korean government announced Wednesday that it plans to provide an initial contribution of $1 million.
As this year's host, we played an active role in the second senior officials meeting and other various ministerial meetings to overcome mutual challenges and come up with meaningful outcomes.
This comes after South Korea earlier revealed that it hopes to focus on 2 key agenda items at this year's APEC summit: artificial intelligence and demographic changes led by aging populations. And from Thursday to Friday, the APEC Trade Ministers meeting is set to take place in Jeju. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, who plays a key role in shaping the Trump administration's tariff policy, is expected to be there. The executive director of APEC said the officials will discuss ways to keep trade open and integrate digital tools such as AI into trade facilitation.
And this is why tomorrow's meeting of the ministers responsible for trade is so important. As executive director of the APEC Secretariat, I've seen firsthand how challenging these times are, but I've also seen how APEC continues to serve as a space for economies to work together, even when views differ.
배은지, 아리랑 News, Jeju.
On the cultural front, an opera entirely in English, planned and produced by the state-run Seoul Arts Center, will premiere on May 25th, that is next Sunday, to offer the audience a performance that beautifully blends Korean and Western elements. Our He has more.
This May, SAC will debut its first ever original opera, The Rising World, Spirit of Water. Blending traditional Korean themes with a modern twist, the English language production marks a major milestone created entirely in-house from story to music. The opera tells the story of a princess captivated by a water spirit and a female artisan who builds a water clock to save a kingdom plagued by constant water disasters. The cast features internationally acclaimed opera singers, including South Korean soprano Hwang Soo-mi as the princess and mezzo-soprano Kim Jung-mi as the artisan.
I would say that the work portrays a human being, regardless of gender, who engages with nature, particularly through the element we call water. It explores the relationship between humanity and nature.
The element of water is expressed in many ways throughout the music. The opera's composer, Australian Mary Finster, explains that while you might hear it through electroacoustic sounds or a special instrument called a waterphone, the feeling of water mostly comes through the orchestra's instrumentation and the flowing ornamentation in the vocal lines. The show will have its world premiere at the Seoul Arts Center's Opera House on May 25th, followed by performances on May 29th and 31st. The creative team boasts international talent, including conductor Stephen Osgood, praised for his work at the Metropolitan Opera in New York, leading the Korean National Symphony Orchestra.
It's our window into the imagination of the composer and the librettist. I get pages, hundreds of pages of music. But what it is on the page is dots of ink.
Those pages, filled with countless notes, are a world the conductor steps into. He waters it and breathes life into it so the music can finally reach our ears. Now it's the audience's turn to step into that imagined world and fully experience an opera like a powerful fairy tale, one that flows with a message we can all feel. Iunhee, Arirang News.
It was another very hot day, but for tomorrow we'll see a change as rain is expected across the country, which should bring a break from the recent summer-like temperatures. And about the rain, the capital area in Gangwon-do province could see 5 to 20 millimeters. The rest of the country could see 5 to 10 from the dawn into the afternoon. Checking on tomorrow's temperatures now, most parts begin the day in the mid-teens at 16 degrees Celsius in the capital, Chuncheon, Busan at 15 degrees. Then afternoon highs will be 2 to 7 degrees lower tomorrow, getting up to 19 degrees here in Seoul, warmer in Gyeongju at 24 degrees. Then we are looking at another chance of rain for the southern regions in Jeju Island on Friday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And that is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.